Hi folks, welcome back to Aeon Pro and another episode of This Week in Review. It's the first day of the new week, which means it's time to talk about the biggest stories in tech and gaming news from last week. Now, I don't want to say it was a slow week, but it definitely felt like the tech and gaming industry was recovering from last week's big, huge CES 2019. Not a lot of big stories to talk about today. We do have a lot of gaming news, but before we get to that, let's talk about probably the biggest thing in tech news this week, and that was the announcement that the Intel 9990XE was going to be released. Now, this is going to be Intel's highest classed Xeon processor. It is part of the i9 series, but it is their upper end sort of high workstation or desktop processor. The interesting thing about this is it's going to have a 4.0 base clock with a 5.0 boost clock while being a 14-core 28-thread processor. Now, the biggest thing about this is that they're not actually going to be selling it. As of right now, pretty much every source that I could find says that this is actually going to be an auctioned chip. Basically, people are going to bid on it, and I guess whoever gets it gets it. It's kind of a weird business practice, but you know, Intel's been kind of running the show for a while now, so they must feel like they can do whatever they want. Personally, I'm not all that excited about this chip. I think it would be an interesting piece for people who are looking for workstations, but they offer more cores and more threads in their lower packages, such as the 9980XE, without being auctioned. So I think if you're looking for a part of that magnitude, it's probably a better bet to just grab the one that you know the price of. Kind of weird to auction on it. Nobody really wants to build their system based off of the top of the line processor if it's only available through a bid war. So I guess it's a way of keeping things to a limited number. My expectation is that prices on these are going to be pretty high once they actually win the bids. So we might follow up on it down the line a little bit, but for now, that's pretty much it on that front. Moving on, Sony PlayStation 4 owners can now feel assured in the fact that yet another single title is going to support cross-platform play. It looks like Rocket League players are finally going to be able to play cross-platform between Xbox, PC, and PlayStation 4. Still no word on whether Sony wants to bring cross-platform play to their entire lineup, but it is another addition to their very short list of games that offer cross-platform play. It's not a very new title, so it's kind of interesting that they're announcing this now, but apparently there was enough call for it, and you know, so Rocket League players rejoice, you got it. The rest of us are just going to be stuck playing Overwatch on each system individually. Now, the hype train was rolling last week as we started seeing footage and getting official gameplay trailers for the new Mortal Kombat 11. Some of the behind-the-scenes stuff about this game is a little questionable in terms of, you know, who's coming back to voice certain characters and who isn't. It was announced that Ronda Rousey is going to be playing the voice of Sonya Blade, which, as a voice actor, I find kind of weird. You'd think if she were playing maybe a body double, doing mocap, or just being the in-game model for the character, that'd be one thing, but to be voicing the character as well is kind of a stretch. This also kind of ignited a little bit of controversy because she has said some, shall we say, less than kind things in the past. She's got some public tweets and public statements about trans rights and things like that, which don't really endear her to the people in those communities. So I'm not expecting their backlash to have too much of an effect on sales. Not to say that their voices don't have power, but typically those aren't the people who are going to be buying Mortal Kombat in the first place. So I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. But at least from a voiceover perspective, it is a weird case. Very different from what you usually see in stunt casting, which is when they get like a big movie star to voice a character or something like that. It's a little bit of a stretch to grab an MMA fighter to do that when they're not voicing themselves. So we'll see how she does, and I guess try not to be too critical. It is Mortal Kombat after all, so I don't know what I'm expecting. And sad news for Star Wars game fans, it looks like EA finally pulled the plug on an unnamed Star Wars game that was set to kind of take place in sort of the rebel slash bounty hunter slash scoundrel kind of feel We had seen some pre-alpha gameplay trailers of people walking around, some of the scenery and things like that, but it looks like that game is actually going to be canceled, which is really frustrating. EA hasn't been handling the Star Wars franchise very well. They're about halfway through a 10-year licensing run, and we've got 2 games, Battlefront and Battlefront 2, and that's it. For those of you who remember the LucasArts days, we used to get sometimes 2 or 3 Star Wars games every year. And so it's been a bit of a dry spell for Star Wars games on the console and PC. We've gotten a lot of mobile games, not really the same thing though. They are still currently working on another game, and so we're just gonna kind of have to keep our hopes up and fingers crossed that they don't cancel that one as well. So the last thing I want to talk about this week is the announcement of a new gaming console, or at least the re-announcement of this gaming console. We actually wanted to talk about this about 2 weeks ago, but we ended up not doing a weekend review show that week, so we ended up not talking about it. But Slightly Mad Studios, the guys behind Project Cars, they've decided that they're going to branch into the console world. And their first announcement of the sort of concept design for these boxes, which they're calling the Mad Box, was different, to say the least. Very gaudy, looked excessively large, and it sort of looked very futuristic, but I think impractical. But this past week, they've, I guess, re-released and officially announced the real concept art for their Mad Box. It's a lot sleeker, a lot slimmer, looks more like a gaming console. And, you know, we don't have a whole lot of information about this console right now. It's still all being kind of teased for maybe a 2020 release or 2021. I've heard it kind of jump around in years, so we don't really know when and where this is coming out. We do know they're working on it. We've got pictures now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see somebody else try and stick a foot into that gaming console world. Nobody's really been able to challenge Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft in the West anyway for quite some time. So it'll be interesting to see how this does. More on that as we get closer to any sort of real release, perhaps any sort of exclusive or something along those lines. But in the meantime, we get to look at this shiny box. Well, that's going to do it for this week in review for the week of January 14th through January 20th, 2019. If there's any story you think we missed or you had something to say about what we talked about, feel free to leave your notes in the comments down below. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys next week. Seriously, none of these Gundams are mine. They're my roommates, but they are amazing, and he has gone just a